October 29th, 1998, a date that was inscribed by Mother Nature herself in the pages of meteorological history. A day when every eye in Central America was fixated on the swirling chaos that was approaching. Today, on a day like this, the day that the second deadliest Atlantic hurricane in history made landfall in Honduras. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that, if you like these videos, you can subscribe to the channel. It would help me a lot to continue making them. Once that has been said, let's rewind time back to an era where climate change wasn't yet a household term, but its effects were already being felt. The late 90s were known for their cultural shifts, a booming global economy, and fascinating technological advances. However, there was an impending doom not many saw coming: severe weather conditions that were slowly claiming lives and smashing records. 1998 was a particularly disastrous year for hurricanes. The unheard-of warmth in the tropical Atlantic Ocean led to abundant hurricane activity, marking it one of the most destructive hurricane seasons on record. The infamous hurricane season of '98 was near its end when something popped up on the radar: Hurricane Mitch. Mitch began as a nameless tropical wave off Africa's coast in mid-October. The sequence of atmospheric events allowed this system to sail undisturbed across the Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea, intensifying rapidly due to the warmer-than-usual sea surface temperatures. Hurricane Mitch was underestimated at first, but caught everyone by surprise when it exploded into a Category 5 hurricane in just a few days. Experts watched with bated breath as Mitch reached astounding wind speeds of 180 miles per hour over the open sea. It's worth remembering that these speeds rival even that of some of the most notorious twisters. Forecasting the track of such storms is challenging even with today's technology, much less so in the late 90s. We must acknowledge that while we could track hurricanes with much less certainty back then, we weren't completely blind either. With access to weather satellites and computer models getting better, meteorologists could provide warnings and potential paths for hurricanes, albeit with wide uncertainty zones. Yet, despite progress in this field, the exact landfall sites remained unpredictable until hours before it happened. Honduras woke up on October 29th to the grave news that they were directly in the line of fire. Zooming a bit into the geographical and societal context, Honduras is a Central American country known for its natural beauty, but also its vulnerability to natural disasters. The country is situated in the middle of the hurricane belt, making it prone to both Atlantic and Pacific storms. Its rugged landscape, marked by mountains and valleys, exacerbates hurricane threats, turning heavy rain into devastating floods and landslides. The severity of these threats is further amplified by the fact that a large portion of Honduras's population lives in poverty, with limited access to resources for disaster preparedness or recovery. In 1998, living conditions for Honduran people were far from ideal, even without Mitch making an appearance. Economic struggles were not uncommon, and despite efforts towards political stability amidst rampant corruption, inequality was high. When Mitch hit, it preyed on these vulnerabilities, making the resulting impact far more devastating. Looking at the broader picture, Hurricane Mitch is not just a meteorological event that occurred by chance. It ties into the larger narrative of our changing climate and societies that are forced to bear the brunt. Lessons from Mitch continue to echo warnings to this day about the growing severity of climate change-fueled severe weather events and our collective responsibility in preparing for them. As we move forward in this story, bear in mind that though this is a historical tragedy and a meteorological marvel, it is fundamentally about people, the people of Honduras, their resilience, perseverance in the face of hardships, and how their lives got interweaved with this monstrous storm that went by the name of Mitch. On October 29, 1998, the invisible beast thundered ashore near the town of La Ceiba on the north coast of Honduras. Mitch was now a Category 1 storm, but it was moving very slowly, which allowed it to hover over Honduras, drenching it with relentless rain for days on end. Mitch didn't hit with just the strength of its winds. It was slow-moving, and this, quite counterintuitively, amplified its destructive power. Think about it this way: a sprinter racing down the track is quick and done, but a marathon runner, despite being slower, is in the game for far longer. Similarly, Mitch's lingering over Honduras meant that rain just kept coming and coming. Imagine 2 full days and nights of continuous rain. That's hard to grasp, but let's venture closer. Imagine this: you're in Honduras. As the first chilling winds start to buffet against your window, news flashes confirm your worst fear. Mitch has finally arrived at your doorstep. The rain starts as just a mild drizzle, almost soothing. But slowly, it builds up speed and intensity. An hour passes by, then 2, 4, 6. The rain doesn't stop. Your town starts to flood. Rivers overflow, bringing along anything unlucky enough to be in their path. Your neighborhood is underwater now, and soon enough, you find water seeping into your home from doors and windows. This is just the beginning of it. Over the course of that harrowing week, continual heavy rainfall led to catastrophic floods and mudslides across the country. The colossal volume of rainwater caused rivers to burst their banks, wiping out entire towns situated in valleys, leaving them completely underwater. The mountainsides, soaked to the brim, transformed into deadly landslides, burying communities beneath. And remember, for many Hondurans, moving to safer ground was not as simple as it sounds. Poverty and sparse infrastructure made escape routes dangerous, if not impossible. Worse still, Mitch was not just a storm, but a horrifyingly persistent one. The rain kept hammering, and water levels kept rising. Day after day, relentless downpour broke river banks, triggered landslides, and washed away entire communities, with residents having no option but to abandon their homes, seeking safer ground. A mind-boggling 2 meters of rain fell during this time. That's almost twice the annual rainfall for many major cities. Imagine thousands upon thousands of homes meanwhile being swamped by water, ripped apart by gushing floodwaters, or simply buried under the landslides. Admittedly, such a scenario is hard to visualize, but the residents of Honduras lived this nightmare in real time. To truly understand the magnitude of the event, picture this. The Tegucigalpa airport, a link to the outside world and resources, sat under 10 feet of water. This essentially cut off international assistance when it was desperately needed. Over a span of a few days, Mother Nature's fury had turned a tropical paradise into an aquatic wasteland, a reality far worse than any could have imagined. Some weather experts equate the extreme rainfall caused by Mitch to such seen in a 1,000-year event. Though we find comfort in categorizing these events into numbers and probabilities, it can't quite capture the human experience behind them. Fear, helplessness, sorrow. This visceral reality of living through Mitch is something that only those who experienced it can fully understand. The memory of Mitch, as painful as it is, serves as a powerful reminder that Mother Nature holds cards we're still learning to predict and understand. Once Mitch had passed over and the skies had cleared, the sheer devastation left in its wake was a sight that brought even the most stoic of hearts to their knees. In its aftermath, life as known by many had been irrevocably changed. In terms of human lives, Hurricane Mitch is regarded as the second deadliest Atlantic hurricane on record, right after the Great Hurricane of 1780. The storm claimed an estimated 11,000 lives directly, with thousands more missing. Such a high death toll from a natural disaster had not been seen in years, making Mitch's havoc all the more heart-wrenching. The most casualty occurred in Honduras and Nicaragua. This catastrophic hurricane affected nearly 3 million people in Honduras alone. That's roughly half of the country's total population at that time. Mitch didn't discriminate in its path of destruction. It wiped out entire cities, neighborhoods, hospitals, schools, and crop fields. According to reports from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, approximately 70% of crops were destroyed in Honduras, leaving countless farmers without their source of income, and pushing an already struggling country further into poverty. The infrastructure damage was equally horrifying. Roads turned into rivers, bridges collapsed or were washed away altogether, severing communities off from essential resources, essentially cutting off lifelines. Furthermore, disease began to run rampant in the aftermath. As if losing so much wasn't enough, locals found themselves battling outbreaks of dengue fever, cholera, and malaria due to stagnant water and poor sanitation, adding to an already tremendous loss of life. If we put these horrific losses into numbers, some sources indicate an estimate of $8 billion of damage across Central America. The disaster's scale led to one of the most significant relief efforts ever mounted in the Americas. The recovery process was prolonged, spanning across years, even decades. Many areas, particularly the hardest hit, took years to rebuild and recover. Some are still experiencing the lasting effects of Mitch. Moreover, the mammoth task of reconstruction wasn't just about rebuilding physical structures. It was about resetting lives, livelihoods, and a whole lot more. This event led to a massive displacement of people. According to reports by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, over 1.5 million people were displaced in Honduras, their homes washed away or buried under mudslides. A ray of hope amidst this looming despair were the international aid and relief efforts that sprung into action immediately after Mitch had passed. Countries around the globe, international organizations, and nonprofit groups poured in support, sending food supplies, medical teams, rescuers. They helped set up refugee camps and temporary shelters for those rendered homeless. Despite being over 2 decades back, learning of Mitch's aftermath can feel incredibly raw even today. The hurricane dramatically reversed years of progress that Honduras had made in poverty reduction and economic growth. It set the economic development back by nearly 20 years. Think about that for a moment. A progress of several years wiped out in a matter of days. It was estimated that the cost of rebuilding after Mitch equated to more than 70% of the country's GDP. Just imagine trying to bounce back as a nation from an economic loss of that scale. Looking at the physical landscape, more than 35,000 homes were destroyed, and another 50,000 damaged. The problem wasn't just about giving people a roof over their heads, it's rebuilding entire communities. Elementary infrastructure that we take for granted, pathways, bridges, churches, public buildings, all had to be painstakingly rebuilt. The hurricane also wiped out about 80% of the transportation infrastructure. We're talking roads washed off, bridges collapsed. This breakdown in basic transport routes drastically complicated the recovery process because how do you bring in aid when you can't reach people? Several countries sent financial aid, food supplies, and human resources for rescue and recovery work. For example, United States provided over $70 million in immediate disaster assistance. A multitude of non-governmental organizations, too, were integral in post-Mitch recovery, working tirelessly by providing assistance to the most hit areas. It's also inspiring to note how the disaster brought forth resilience and unity among the Honduran people. Communities banded together to support each other, establish shelters, and share resources. Mitch served as a wake-up call to not just Honduras but the entire world on understanding the importance of disaster preparedness and climate change mitigation. It urged countries to draft policies considering hazard risk reduction and adapt a more integrated approach towards development planning. Now, when we try and look at the full picture of Mitch's impact, it's important to remember that it's more than just the cold numbers or facts. It's about understanding the human side of the event. The lives altered, communities changed, and countries reshaped in a matter of days. This is what really brings home the enormous scale of this tragedy, that a single natural event could have such extensive and devastating effects on millions. The scale and devastation of Hurricane Mitch deeply scarred Central America, but also forced an international dialogue on disaster risk reduction and the increasingly critical issue of climate change. The storm implored the rest of the world to understand that for many, climate change isn't some far-off worry, but rather an immediate threat to their lives, homes, and future. In the decades since Mitch, we've seen remarked changes. We now understand hurricanes and their variant components like storm surge and rainfall far better than we did 2 decades ago. Technology has improved. Forecasts are more accurate, providing us with ample time to prepare, improving our resilience for similar events. While we stride forward in our quest for knowledge, hoping to ensure we never see a day like October 29, 1998 again, let's take a moment to remember those affected by Hurricane Mitch. Their bravery, resilience, and ability to rebuild from what seemed like an apocalypse is inspiring. The echo of their struggle and solidarity is what we take away from remembering these events. After traveling back in time today to relive the nightmare of one of Atlantic's deadliest storms, I would love to hear your thoughts. What did you find most shocking or unexpected about the story of Hurricane Mitch? Have any of you or your family been affected by severe hurricanes? How do you think we can better prepare ourselves and our societies for such unimaginable events? Feel free to leave a comment in this video. Also, again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell for more deep dives into significant historical events. And remember, history is not just a passive record of events. It's a tool we can use to shape our understanding, learn from our past mistakes, and hopefully fortify ourselves against similar horrors we might face in the future. Thank you for being a part of this journey today, and I'll see you next time for another event that happened on a day like this.